The Panzerfaust 38 was one of Germany's earliest dedicated anti-tank weapons, developed in the late 1930s when armored warfare was rapidly evolving. At the time, German planners believed infantry needed a lightweight, man-portable solution to defeat lightly armored enemy vehicles, especially reconnaissance tanks and early war light armor. The PZB-38 was designed as a single-shot, bolt-action anti-tank rifle, firing the powerful 92 x 94 mm Patronen round. Weighing around 15 kilograms, the PZB-38 was heavy but still transportable by a single soldier. Its most unusual feature was its falling block action, which automatically opened after firing, ejecting the spent casing and allowing the soldier to quickly load the next round. This design increased the practical rate of fire compared to earlier experimental rifles. In combat, the PZB-38 proved effective during the early stages of World War II, particularly during the invasions of Poland and France. Against lightly armored vehicles such as armored cars and early tanks, it could penetrate armor at short distances, usually under 300 meters. However, as tank armor rapidly improved, the rifle's effectiveness declined. Another major limitation was recoil. Firing the powerful cartridge produced intense recoil and muzzle blast, making sustained firing exhausting and uncomfortable. Soldiers also had to expose themselves while aiming, increasing battlefield risk. By 1941, encounters with heavily armored Soviet tanks, such as the T-34, rendered the PZB-38 largely obsolete. Although still dangerous to soft targets and light vehicles, it could no longer reliably penetrate modern tank armor. As a result, Germany began phasing it out in favor of more powerful solutions. Despite its limitations, the Panzerfaust 38 represents an important transitional step in infantry anti-tank warfare. It reflects early war thinking, when speed, mobility, and lightweight weapons were prioritized over raw, destructive power. The Panzerfaust 39 was an improved version of the earlier PZB-38, introduced to address some of the shortcomings discovered during early combat. While still using the same 92 x 94 mm ammunition, the PZB-39 featured a simplified design, making it lighter, more reliable, and easier to manufacture under wartime conditions. At approximately 12.6 kilograms, the PZB-39 was slightly lighter, allowing infantry units to maneuver more easily. It retained the falling block action, but improved the feeding mechanism, resulting in a smoother firing cycle. This made it more suitable for frontline conditions where dirt, mud, and debris were constant problems. Early in the war, the PZB-39 achieved moderate success against enemy light tanks, armored cars, and half-tracks. German infantry frequently used it in ambush positions, targeting side armor or rear engine compartments where protection was weakest. At close range, accurate shots could disable tracks or damage vital components. However, the weapon suffered from the same fundamental limitation as its predecessor: rapidly increasing enemy armor thickness. By the time of Operation Barbarossa, Soviet medium and heavy tanks were effectively immune to the rifle's penetration capabilities. To extend its usefulness, specialized ammunition was introduced, including tungsten core rounds. These improved penetration slightly, but were expensive and limited in supply due to tungsten shortages. By 1942, the PZB-39 was increasingly relegated to secondary roles or withdrawn entirely. Many were later repurposed as grenade launchers or converted for other uses. Despite its obsolescence, the rifle played a significant role in the early years of the war. The Panzerfaust 39 demonstrates the rapid pace of technological change during World War II and highlights why anti-tank rifles quickly gave way to shaped charge weapons. The 3.7 cm Panzerabwehrkanone 36, commonly known as the PaK-36, was the backbone of German anti-tank defense at the start of World War II. Designed in the interwar period, it reflected Germany's early confidence that most enemy tanks would be lightly armored and vulnerable to small-caliber guns. The PaK-36 was lightweight, highly mobile, and easy to conceal. Its small size allowed it to be manhandled by its crew into firing positions, making it ideal for defensive ambushes. Firing armor-piercing rounds, it could penetrate early French, Polish, and British tanks at combat ranges. During the invasions of Poland and France, the Pak-36 performed adequately, reinforcing German confidence in its design. However, the situation changed dramatically on the Eastern Front. Soviet tanks such as the T-34 and KV-1 proved nearly impervious to the gun's standard ammunition. German crews mockingly nicknamed it the Heeresklopfgerät, or Army Door Knocker, because shells would bounce harmlessly off heavy armor. This psychological impact was severe, as gunners were forced to engage tanks they knew they could not destroy. To compensate, Germany introduced the Steel Granite 41, a large-shaped charge projectile, mounted on the barrel. While this allowed penetration of heavy armor at very short range, it reduced accuracy and exposed crews to extreme danger. Despite its obsolescence, the Pak-36 continued to serve in secondary theaters and against light vehicles. Its early war success and later failure perfectly illustrate how quickly tank warfare outpaced existing technology. The 5 cm Pak-38 was Germany's response to the growing inadequacy of smaller anti-tank guns. Introduced in 1940, it represented a significant leap in firepower, capable of engaging medium tanks that had previously been difficult to defeat. With a longer barrel and higher muzzle velocity, the Pak-38 could penetrate substantially thicker armor than the Pak-36. It remained relatively mobile for its size, allowing crews to reposition it quickly during combat. On the Eastern Front, the Pak-38 proved capable of defeating early T-34 tanks at short to medium ranges, particularly when firing tungsten core ammunition. This restored some confidence among German anti-tank units during the critical early phases of the campaign. However, the gun was not without drawbacks. Tungsten ammunition was scarce, and standard rounds struggled against later tank variants. As enemy armor continued to improve, even the Pak-38 began to show limitations. Despite this, the weapon served throughout much of the war and was widely respected by its crews. It marked the transition between early war light guns and the heavier anti-tank weapons that would follow. The Pak-38 stands as a symbol of Germany's constant race to counter evolving Allied armor. The 7.5 cm Panzerabwehrkanone 40, better known as the Pak-40, was the most important and widely used German anti-tank gun of World War II. Introduced in 1942, it was designed specifically to counter heavily armored Allied tanks, such as the Soviet T-34 and KV series, which had shocked German forces on the Eastern Front. The Pak-40 fired a powerful 75 mm armor-piercing shell at high velocity, giving it excellent penetration capability. At typical combat ranges, it could destroy almost any Allied tank it encountered, especially when engaging from ambush positions. This made it the backbone of German defensive anti-tank strategy for the rest of the war. Weighing over 1,400 kilograms, the Pak-40 was much heavier than earlier anti-tank guns. While this reduced mobility, the increased firepower was considered a necessary trade-off. Crews often relied on vehicles or horses to move it, and once deployed, the gun was usually dug in for protection and concealment. On the battlefield, the Pak-40 was feared by Allied tank crews. Its high-velocity rounds could penetrate frontal armor at medium ranges, and side or rear hits were often catastrophic. German doctrine emphasized camouflage and ambush tactics, allowing Pak-40 crews to strike before enemy tanks even realized they were under fire. Despite its effectiveness, the gun had disadvantages. Its size made it difficult to reposition under fire, and once discovered it was vulnerable to artillery and air attacks. Ammunition shortages late in the war also reduced its operational effectiveness. Nevertheless, the Pak-40 remained in frontline service until the end of the war and is widely regarded as one of the most successful anti-tank guns of World War II. It represented the peak of conventional towed anti-tank gun design. The Panzerfaust was one of the most revolutionary anti-tank weapons of World War II. Unlike traditional guns, it was a single-use, shoulder-fired weapon designed to give ordinary infantry soldiers the ability to destroy tanks at close range. Introduced in 1943, it became a symbol of Germany's desperate but innovative late-war defenses. The Panzerfaust used a shaped charge warhead capable of penetrating extremely thick armor, regardless of distance or impact angle. Even the heaviest Allied tanks were vulnerable if hit correctly. Its simple design required minimal training, making it ideal for mass production and distribution to Volkssturm units and regular infantry alike. One of the Panzerfaust's greatest strengths was its ease of use. A soldier simply aimed, fired, and discarded the weapon. There was no recoil, but a dangerous backblast meant it had to be fired from open positions. Effective range was limited, usually between 30 and 100 meters, depending on the variant. In urban combat, the Panzerfaust was devastating. German soldiers used it from buildings, rubble, and narrow streets, ambushing Allied tanks from above or from the sides. During battles such as Berlin, Panzerfausts accounted for a significant number of tank losses. However, the weapon had limitations. Its short range forced soldiers to get dangerously close to enemy armor, often under heavy fire. Accuracy also dropped sharply beyond short distances, and inexperienced users sometimes missed or misjudged range. Despite these drawbacks, the Panzerfaust fundamentally changed infantry anti-tank warfare. Its influence can be seen in post-war rocket launchers and modern anti-tank weapons. It proved that cheap, disposable weapons could effectively counter even the most powerful tanks. The Panzerschreck, officially designated Raketenpanzer Buchse 54, was Germany's reusable rocket-propelled anti-tank weapon and a direct response to the American bazooka. Introduced in 1943, it gave German infantry a powerful tool capable of destroying even the heaviest Allied tanks. Unlike the single-use Panzerfaust, the Panzerschreck could be reloaded and fired multiple times. It launched an 88 rocket with a shaped charge warhead that could penetrate thick armor with devastating effect. Even well-armored tanks like the Sherman or Churchill were vulnerable from almost any angle. One of the earliest problems with the Panzerschreck was safety. The rocket's exhaust created intense backblast and sparks, endangering the operator. Early versions lacked shielding, forcing soldiers to wear protective gear. Later models added a blast shield to improve survivability. The weapon's effective range was greater than the Panzerfaust, usually around 120 to 150 meters, allowing soldiers to engage tanks from safer distances. This made it particularly effective in defensive positions and ambush scenarios. However, the Panzerschreck was heavy and bulky, weighing over 11 kilograms when loaded. This limited mobility and made it less suitable for rapid assaults. Smoke trails from the rocket also revealed the firing position, often drawing immediate return fire. Despite these drawbacks, the Panzerschreck was one of the most feared infantry anti-tank weapons of the war. It remained in service until Germany's surrender and influenced many post-war rocket launcher designs. The 8.8 centimeters Pak-43 was one of the most powerful anti-tank guns ever deployed during World War II. Derived from the famous 88 anti-aircraft gun lineage, it was designed to destroy heavily armored tanks at long ranges where return fire was difficult or impossible. Firing high-velocity 88 armor-piercing shells, the Pak-43 could penetrate nearly any Allied tank from well beyond a kilometer. This extreme range and accuracy made it deadly in open terrain, particularly on the Eastern Front and in Western Europe during defensive operations. The gun's main disadvantage was its size and weight. At over 4 tons, it was extremely difficult to move and required heavy vehicles for transport. Once deployed, crews often dug it into fixed positions, using camouflage to conceal its massive silhouette. In combat, the Pak-43 was terrifyingly effective. Allied tank crews frequently reported tanks being destroyed before they even saw the source of fire. Its psychological impact was immense, reinforcing German reliance on long-range defensive firepower. Because of its cost and complexity, the Pak-43 was produced in limited numbers compared to the Pak-40. It was also mounted on tank destroyers such as the Nashorn and Jagdpanther, where its firepower could be used more flexibly. The Pak-43 represented the peak of traditional anti-tank gun development, immensely powerful, but ultimately too heavy and specialized for a rapidly changing battlefield. The Steel Granite 41 was a unique and desperate solution to the inadequacy of early war German anti-tank guns. Designed to extend the usefulness of the obsolete 3.7 cm Pak-36, it was a large, fin-stabilized shaped charge grenade mounted directly onto the gun's barrel. Unlike conventional shells, the steel granite relied entirely on shaped charge penetration rather than velocity. This allowed it to penetrate heavy armor that the Pak-36's standard ammunition could not, theoretically restoring its anti-tank capability. In practice, the weapon was extremely dangerous to use. Its effective range was very short, usually under 300 meters, forcing crews to expose themselves to enemy fire. Accuracy was limited, and reload times were slow. Despite these risks, the Steel Granite 41 could penetrate even heavily armored tanks if it hit correctly. This made it a last resort weapon, often used in ambushes or defensive positions where retreat was impossible. Psychologically, it gave Pack 36 crews renewed confidence, knowing they at least had a chance against superior enemy armor. However, it was never a true replacement for modern anti-tank guns. The Steel Granite 41 illustrates how urgently Germany tried to adapt outdated weapons to new battlefield realities, even when those solutions were risky and impractical.